Hi guys, and welcome to today's lesson. Today I will run through the questions that you were working with in our last lesson and which you used to create your screencasts from. And let me just add on that note that I'm pretty impressed about how seriously you are approaching school work, at least in my subject. So keep that up for the remainder of the year, and we definitely don't have a problem. All right. Now for the questions that you were working with, you were supposed to, in the lesson before our last lesson, you were supposed to create questions for the first chapter of American Rust. Now those questions should be divided into the three categories that make up Bloom's taxonomic levels. So you were meant to make 3 comprehension questions, 3 analysis questions, and 2 discussion questions. And on the basis of all of those questions that you made, I picked out 8, and those were the questions that you worked with in our last lesson. Now, I just want to run through these questions, both to make sure that we all agree on an answer for them, but also I'd like to talk about why they are good questions at that specific taxonomic level that they belong to. So let's begin with question 1 here, which is meant to be a comprehension question. Why is Isaac out walking? Well, the answer for this question that most of you got right is that, well, Isaac is running away from home. He stole some money from his father, and now he's setting out on a on a trip, which is, and I hope you picked up on this the little reference to Jack Kerouac. He's setting out on a on the road kind of trip. Anyway, that's why he's out walking. It's a great comprehension question because it's really the basis of the chapter. Isaac is running away from home. He's seeking adventure elsewhere, and so in that way, it's we understand the premise of the chapter based on this question. That's really what sets off the chapter. Now it's just a comprehension question because we're not analyzing any literary tools here. We're not comparing this character to another character and evaluating whether or not there are similarities or differences and so forth. So it's not a discussion question either. It is really just understanding what sets events in motion here in the beginning of the book. All right. Second question, where is Isaac's sister? Well, the answer for this is that she is studying at an Ivy League school, or at least she has been studying at an Ivy League school and is now somewhere on the East Coast. So she is in a totally different environment. She has left this environment, and for this she receives some rejection, some sort of negative attitude from Isaac, who is still in his environment. And I think this is used to sort of stress both why Isaac feels abandoned, why he has these feelings of resentment towards his sister, but it also stresses the difference in the environment here in the Rust Belt and then the environment on the East Coast. And again, it's really just a kind of a summary question that we're not asked to analyze anything, but what it does is when you answer it, it illustrates a lot of the sort of conditions that are being portrayed in this chapter. And that's what a good comprehension question does. It sort of uncovers a lot of the primary content of the text. Finally, how does Isaac refer to his father? Again, basically just go to the chapter, right? How does he talk about his father? Well, he says mostly negative things about his father, calls him a little Hitler, among other things, right? It's an easy enough question to answer, but what we're actually seeing here is that that there are some underlying social tensions in Isaac's home, which is also part of the theme of the book, at least of this chapter, right? So once again, a comprehension question is actually used to uncover parts of the theme without us having to analyze anything. And again, I think that's what good comprehension questions do. All right, now for the first analysis question, you were asked to comment on the type of narration. Now, what we have here is a third-person narration, but definitely seen from Isaac's point of view. And what we also have is we have a type of narration that are not straight out chronological, but is mixed with flashbacks, which again adds to our perception of the story. For instance, Isaac is talking about or thinking about when Poe saved his life, basically. Another part of the type of narration is the relatively large amount of dialogue between Isaac and Poe, which is also a very sort of unique literary feature, and which sort of builds on this show it, don't tell it principle from literature. Through this type of narration, we get a lot more knowledgeable about what type of character Isaac is and what kind of problems that he is dealing with and the type of past that he has had. So that makes it a good analysis question. 5, comment on the setting description when Isaac walks to Poe's place. Well, here we really see sort of the desolate surroundings that is Isaac's environment. We see the abandoned factories and steel mills. We see the industrial wasteland, which is what Isaac is also running away from. So the setting is very important here, and definitely part of the theme of this sort of despair that people suffer or have when they live in these regions of the U.S. All right. Analysis question 6, or the third analysis question. Give a characterization of Poe. Well, a characterization of primary characters in literature, that is analysis, that is literary analysis. And Poe here is sort of a key figure in describing how things are, how the conditions are in these areas of the U.S. He is a former football star from high school, who, when that part of his life ended, when high school ended, suddenly he had nowhere to go and nothing to do. And that's why he's living in the past, why he's still walking around with his high school football jacket on. We also see a description of his car, which Isaac refers to as a $3,000 paint job, and then a pile of rubbish. So someone who is not spending the little money that he has wisely. So in that way, Poe becomes very reflective of that environment that we see these characters in. That's why that's also a good analysis question. Finally, the discussion questions, which is where you discuss whatever findings you have from your analysis. Now, question 7 asks us, what seems to be the initial theme of the novel? Well, the initial theme of the novel is the American Rust Belt, the industrial wastelands that have been left behind because of globalization, because of the loss of trade for these areas, and how that affects the people living there. Definitely, and that's really what we've seen throughout the chapter, and that's what we that's where we end up when we answer our analysis questions, that it's about the place and the lack of opportunities, the lack of wealth, the lack of hope that these characters who are living in these areas of the US have for the future. And then you're asked, can any parallels be drawn to J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy? And yes, of course, because what we're seeing here is basically what J.D. Vance was describing in his Hillbilly Elegy. He showed the social instability in the homes of the people living in these areas. He showed the lack of opportunity, the feeling of loss, the feeling of a lost past, and the hopelessness and despair that we feel in American Rust is definitely something that J.D. Vance also described in his Hillbilly Elegy. Yes, both 7 and 8 are good and proper discussion questions. Right, and overall, good work with the questions, both in making questions, but also in answering the questions. And it's good to see that you have a good understanding of both American Rust, but also of Hillbilly Elegy, because you'll need that knowledge for your next and last essay assignment, which has now been uploaded and which we have right here. Essay assignment 4. In a written essay of 600 to 900 words, you are to make an analysis of the primary tools of rhetoric which Donald Trump uses in his speech from the Republican National Convention in 2016. Now, the Republican National Convention is a convention held to celebrate the choice or the election of the Republican Party's candidate for the presidential election. So typically, this is the big election speech that the candidate gives here. So this is also probably the speech seen and heard by most people. So this is really the core election speech from Donald Trump back in 2016 when he won the presidential election. Besides analyzing tools of rhetoric, your essay should also focus on the target group of the speech and include references to J.D. Vance's Hillbilly Elegy and Philip Meyer's American Rust. That way, tying a nice and pretty bow on this entire topic of Trump's America. All right. You have the rest of today's lesson to work on the essay assignment. Make sure that you get started now, so that you have it up and running. Yeah, then I will see you in our next lesson. All right, guys. Bye-bye.